I'm Jeff Ehrenberg, and this is Pete Lyman. We're business partners at Infrasonic and share the duties in engineering and running the studio.
And how'd you guys meet?
We have the same ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
Hey.
It's kind of a long, convoluted story.
It's a really long story,
Yeah.
but
A really good story, do you mean? Or?
It's fairly good. Jeff had moved back to, what year was that when you moved back to LA?
2003.
And he was in a band that just got signed to Capitol, and he was working for Vintage King. So he moved back here, and he had some equipment, and he wanted to start a studio, and I had a very small studio here, and we had met a few times because, you know, like I said, he was actually dating the girl that I was dating. It was the breakup was fine, so it wasn't a weird thing. But he kept asking me. He's like, you know, I'm looking to start a studio. Maybe we should partner up. And I didn't really take him seriously at first. I was like, wow, this seems kind of weird. He was really persistent. And I was like, well, shit, you know, we you know, maybe we should try this. We actually met and talked about it, and then, you know, we literally had one meeting, and then we just kind of went for it.
Cool.
Yeah, we had breakfast one day,
yeah.
and then pooled our gear together and maxed out our credit cards.
Yeah.
And
So what did the ex-girlfriend think of all that, or is this
She was into it.
Yeah. She was fine.
And you guys would love each other. Okay.
Yeah.
So did you, when you first sort of like, you know, formed this partnership, did you have like a vision for what the studio was going to be, like a mission statement?
Well, we didn't have an official mission statement, but we definitely had ideas in our head how we wanted it to be. I mean, I think, you know, our whole thing was we wanted a facility with really good gear, but we also, you know, understand where we come from. We're both like, you know, dudes that grew up playing in punk rock bands. So as musicians, we always felt uncomfortable walking into recording studios that looked like a cross between like a Starbucks and a chiropractor's office, you know? It's like where all you do is stare at the clock and you know, you're afraid to touch anything. And that's not how we are, you know? We wanted to have the best gear possible, but we also wanted to be a place where you could make music.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
So-
a comfortable, home-like environment. You know, people can come in and like literally take their shoes off and relax and have fun making a record, and not be watching the clock and feel like because this overdub's taken so long, like, you know, they're ruining the budget. You know, we want everybody just to be comfortable and casual and make the best records possible. So
We talked a little bit about what this space was before with Pete. How did you find this property? What was that process like?
Well, I was looking for a place to do a studio and a place for my band to rehearse, and a friend of mine was looking for a place to do his office space for his record label. It was funny. We found this place on Craigslist.
Nice.
It was crazy. The guy that originally owned these properties was insane. I mean, insane. And we almost didn't take the place because he was just like so hard to deal with. He also claimed to be a good friend of Kool Keith's, which is really strange. So if that gives you any idea of how strange he was.
All right.
But the building has since been bought by another person, and we have a long-term lease and you know, really good terms, and it's been great. So that's sort of how this happened. When I originally moved in, it was just a giant shell. I mean, in fact, these buildings actually sat vacant for a while. So the first time when I came to look at them, the original owner had just bought the property, and I mean, this place was bombed out. There was graffiti all over the inside, broken windows, no real doors. It was just a mess.
it resembled a lot of places we would stay on tour, like
Yeah,
in 1996
exactly.
maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there were no walls. It was just a mess.
Yeah.
So, you know, the place stayed fairly industrial until Jeff and I met up. Like I just had, the lounge used to be a small control room, and everything else was open, and you know, we just kind of started from scratch. And,
So Jeff, what was your background before? You know, did you do like recording before, sort of like starting the Infrasonic venture? You said you were in a band. Like, did that kind of lead you into recording?
Yeah, you know, I started playing drums in elementary school. I was in my first original rock band at 14. I was playing like 21 and over clubs at 14, and we pulled our money together and bought a Fostex 1/4-inch 8-track, and one of the mothers in the band gave us her garage. We got salvaged carpet and just hammered it onto the wall. So it was, we weren't thinking about acoustics. We were just thinking about not disturbing the neighborhood,
Yeah,
so we
right.
could play 24 hours a day. So, we had a Fostex quarter-inch 8-track, and we had a friend who worked at a music store who would just let us borrow mics and stuff to do recordings, and that kind of sprouted into us. We were in a small town of about maybe 35,000 people, so we kind of recorded every band in the town for a few-year period, and I just kept getting more gear. I was going to school for more so film production and live sound production. I was doing like musical theater and that sort of thing. So I was doing live sound as a day job and recording in bands as a hobby and going to school and college, for a more technical background in it. And it just all sort of came together. In 1999, the band I was playing with at the time, Starlight Desperation, moved to Detroit. And that band I think we've made 5 records now, so I was really hands-on with all those records. And when we moved to Detroit, I met the guys who owned Vintage King. And it started, I was the drummer in their band. And I worked on a record for that band together. That band was called Chrome Flies. And once they saw that I was, competent in the studio, I started assisting sessions there and then engineered some of my own sessions there. And after 5 years in Michigan, I decided to move back to California. So I brought that corner of Vintage King with me.
This is a good sort of like lead in to talk about Vintage King and what your relationship is with Vintage King now.
This is the Rupert Neve Designs 5088. It's the first console that Rupert has had his name on since Neve of the 70s, which he sold. And from my understanding, I guess when he sold the company, he also sold the ability to use his name for a product. So after decades, he's making this console again in Texas. It's all discreet. It's all Class A. It's all transformer balanced. It's a pleasure to work on, and we sort of came up with a co-op agreement between my studio and Vintage King and Rupert Neve Designs, where we got a deal on the console with the agreement that we would use the console for demo purposes. I bring clients in. I'll actually, if someone's interested in this console, let them bring in a hard drive and do a mix on it. Spend a whole day on the console to really get to know it. Cool. It's such a big purchase and big decision. But in general, Vintage King offers that sort of service for almost everything we sell. Here in Los Angeles, I also have an API 1608. I also have an Audience Zen. I've got every summing mixer on the market, Tone Lux, Shadow Hills. I mean, I must have, 15 to 20 mixers at any given time that are all, so we use the studio and those facilities for our clients to do that sort of thing. But we also go to our clients kind of like the old vacuum cleaner salesman, like knock on the door and...
You carry this console with you.
Yeah, well, not this one. This one's a little too heavy,
Right.
but, an API or any of the summing mixers. So it's a lot of demos here. We do parties and open houses, and we might do a night that features, all of our high-end vocal microphones, or a night that features all of our effects or compressors, things like that. It's a very good cooperative between Vintage King and the studio, and we all work together every single day. Like I mentioned, it's all transformer balanced. It's all Class A discrete as far as the architecture of the mixer portion. The EQs are transformer balanced. They have a couple chips in there. I'm not sure what the functions are, but the console itself has that classic, warm, full, larger-than-life kind of sound that you get out of maybe like a Neve 80 series. Just before you even touch the EQs, everything just sounds sort of fuller and richer in a broadband kind of way. Not it doesn't teeter the tone in any particular direction. Okay. And all the internal routing and architecture is 90-volt rail. So it's very high voltage once it hits the transformer from then on. So it's very forward and articulate. You kind of get that fast, articulate large format SSL kind of sound meets that larger than life Class A transformer sound. To me, it's kind of like the best of both those worlds.
Split between like the 70s and the 80s hi-fi.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, ultra quiet. really, really low noise floor, which is nice because we do a lot of automating in Pro Tools and just leaving a fader, maybe like.
Are these flying faders?
These are not.
No.
There is an option for it, and we kind of regret that we didn't roll it into the lease. But after we started working on it, maybe we'll do that one day. But but we'll do a lot where we're just leaving the fader at Unity and automating in the computer.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And because the console is so quiet, it's nice for that. You're not leaving open a bunch of noise floor.
Okay.
The EQs are really flexible. We actually have two types of EQs on the desk. On the first 16 channels, it is a mic pre EQ, a 3-band EQ with a high-pass filter, and you can engage the high-pass filter separately. You can engage the EQ separately, and then Silk mode is actually an additional amplifier that introduces those second and third harmonics for kind of that more retro 70s kind of sound. So you can be kind of clean, modern Class A, or you can be a little more retro by hitting the Silk button. And then we have 5-band EQ. And with my work at Vintage King, I've sold these to mastering guys, but they also, live comfortably in the console. We use these a lot on stereo bus, and each band is independently bypassed, or you can bypass the whole EQ. And then just next to the EQs, we've got 2 stereo compressors, so you can run those stereo or dual mono. And they have another kind of feature, which is kind of like retro and modern. You've got feedback and feed forward. And the feed forward is it's more grabby. It's kind of like a faster compression.
Mm-hmm.
The feedback's a little more laid back. It has a little more glue to it.
Cool. So, now, are those used as inserts? Like these guys, these sort of modules over here, the inserts, or use them as like master bus, like stereo?
Yeah, they are patchable. They don't normal to anything on the console.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll use one of them on the stereo mix and one of them maybe on the drum bus.
Okay. Cool.